Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. You know, retirement planning, it can sometimes feel about as exciting as, sorting through old receipts, am I right?
Definitely not the most glamorous topic.
No, not at all. But it's one of those things we all know we should probably be thinking about a lot more than we actually do. We got our hands on your notes and articles all about figuring out how much to save for retirement, and let me tell you, some of this stuff is pretty eye-opening.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, it seems like you've been really digging into those questions about how much money you'll actually need to retire comfortably, and of course, how to actually reach those savings goals.
The big questions, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wants to know the answers to those.
Exactly. And don't worry, we're not about to hit you with some boring lecture on compound interest or anything like that. Today, we're diving headfirst into those questions, unearthing the must-know information, and hopefully making sure it's actually something you can use and maybe even, enjoy thinking about for a few minutes.
It sounds like a plan. So what's first?
Well, one of the first things that jumped out from these articles is this whole concept of a retirement savings target. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It seems like a lot of experts are always talking about this benchmark, like having 10 times your pre-retirement salary saved by the time you retire. And then on top of that, they say you should plan on living on about 80% of your pre-retirement income, like it's some kind of magic formula or something.
Yeah, the 10X rule gets thrown around a lot. What do you think about that brilliant starting point, or like you said, kind of a recipe for a panic attack?
Honestly, a little bit of both. 10 times my salary, it's a big number.
It definitely grabs your attention, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you're right, that 10X rule, it is a popular one. But it's important to remember, it's really just a starting point. It's like, how do I explain this?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Okay, it's like a good pair of jeans, right?
Retirement planning is like a good pair of jeans.
Hear me out. A good retirement plan, just like a good pair of jeans, it needs to be tailored to fit you perfectly. It's not just about how much you are making before you retire. It's about what your life is actually going to look like during retirement.
I like that. A tailored retirement plan.
Right. And that's where things get interesting, I think. Will you be eligible for Social Security? Do you see yourself maybe working part-time, even if it's just for fun? What about your health? And then there's the big one, your dream lifestyle. All of those things play a role in determining how much you'll realistically need.
It makes sense, right? Like a retiree who's planning on traveling the world every month, they're probably going to need a slightly bigger nest egg than someone who's perfectly content puttering around their garden and reading a good book.
Exactly. It's all about personalization.
I like it.
And speaking of trying to figure out this whole how much do I need question, the articles you shared also mentioned something called the 4% rule. I'm sure you've heard of this one, right?
Oh, the 4% rule. Of course, it's practically a retirement planning legend.
Right. It's gained a lot of traction over the years.
Yeah.
Basically, the idea is you take your desired annual retirement income, so like how much you want to have to spend each year, and you divide that number by 4%. And that gives you a target for how much you should have saved up by the time you retire.
So if you're aiming for, let's just say, a nice, comfortable $80,000 a year in retirement, according to this 4% rule, you'd need a cool $2 million saved.
That's a big number.
Yeah, that 10X rule is suddenly feeling very real.
Definitely eye-opening.
To say the least.
But, let's unpack what that 4% actually means, because it's not quite as simple as it sounds.
There's always a catch.
Well, not necessarily a catch, but like any good rule, this one comes with some caveats, right? For example, it's designed around the assumption of a 30-year retirement. And, well, we know people are living a lot longer these days.
It's true.
So that 30-year retirement, it's becoming less and less common. It also assumes you're going to have an average 5% annual return on your investment.
Yeah.
After you account for things like taxes and inflation, of course. Oh, and here's the kicker. It doesn't even factor in any potential income from Social Security.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty big factor to leave out.
It is.
So it sounds like the 4% rule, kind of like that 10x your salary idea, it's more of a starting point than a hard and fast rule. It's something to keep in mind, but there are other things to think about too, right?
Lots of other things.
Like for starters, people are living longer these days, which is amazing.
It's great.
But it also means our retirement savings have to last even longer.
Definitely.
And then there's healthcare costs. As we get older, those have the potential to,
skyrocket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One study from Fidelity, I think it was, they estimated that the average 65-year-old could end up spending something like $165,000 on healthcare alone during retirement.
Wow.
That's wild, right?
Yeah, it's a big number. And, it really highlights those what-if scenarios that are so important to think about. Like, what happens if there are unexpected market downturns? Or if inflation is higher than we think it's going to be? What about potential changes to Social Security down the road?
Don't even get me started on that.
Right. It's tricky. But those are all things that can have a big impact on your retirement plan, how much you have saved, and how long it will actually last. I mean, that's the real challenge of planning for the future, isn't it? There are just so many unknowns.
It's like trying to, I don't know, pick a winning lottery ticket or something.
Pretty much.
So knowing all of that, like, where do we even start with this whole saving enough thing? Because let's be real, that $2 million figure from that 4% rule, it's a little daunting.
It's a big number. But it doesn't have to be a scary number, I think.
Oh, good.
And that's actually where the articles you sent come in handy, because they had some really good guidance about all of this.
Okay, good. Because I need some guidance.
That we all.
So, like, what's step one?
Well, one of the biggest things that I noticed that seemed to be a theme in a lot of the things that you sent, it's this idea of consistency.
Okay, consistency. Got it. What does that mean exactly, though?
So it's less about suddenly having like $1 million to just put into your retirement fund and much more about saving regularly throughout your career. And ideally, you want to start as early as possible.
So it's more of a slow and steady wins the race kind of approach.
You've got it. Think of it like, I don't know if this makes sense.
Go for it.
Think of it like you're building a muscle.
A retirement muscle.
Yes. A retirement savings muscle. The more you use it, so the more you're putting money in there, even if it's small amounts, the stronger that muscle gets over time.
I like that.
And speaking of specific amounts, Fidelity, they actually suggested aiming to save around 15% of your gross salary each year. And, you know, they said it'd be great if you can start doing that in your 20s.
Okay, hold on a second. Quick question for you. When we talk about this gross salary, for those of us who maybe didn't go to business school, what exactly does that mean?
That is a great question. So glad you asked. Yeah, gross salary just means your total earnings before anything is taken out, like before taxes or insurance or anything like that. Basically, it's the number that you see at the very top of your pay stub before everything else.
Okay, got it. So it's like the bigger, better number that we wish we actually took home.
Kind of, yes.
Okay. So back to this 15% goal. When Fidelity talks about that number, they mean like everything combined, right? It's not just what you're putting in from your paycheck every month. It's also anything that your employer might be putting in, like if they're matching your 401k contributions or something like that.
You got it. It's all about the total amount that's going toward your retirement savings. And this is actually where I think Fidelity's recommendations are pretty helpful because they break it down even further. They've got these benchmarks based on your age and salary that I think are great for visualizing where you should be.
Okay. I like the sound of this because I am a very visual person. So tell me more about these benchmarks.
Okay, so for example, by the time you hit that big 30, the big birthday, Fidelity says you should aim to have saved an amount that's equal to your annual salary. So 1 times your salary. By 40, it should be 3 times your salary.
Okay.
And so on. They call these your salary multiples.
Oh, I like it. Salary multiples. It's like leveling up, but for your retirement savings.
I love it.
Catchy. But, you know, if we're being realistic, consistently saving 15% all throughout your 20s, especially when, you know, a lot of us are just starting out, we might have student loan payments.
Yeah.
Life.
Exactly.
It feels a little, I don't know, ambitious.
You're telling me?
A little bit.
You're not wrong. I mean, it's definitely a big commitment. And realistically, life happens.
Right.
Like you might have unexpected expenses pop up, or we hit an economic downturn. Maybe you're thinking about changing careers, and that impacts how much you can save. I think that's why the articles also mention an alternative approach.
Okay. Tell me more.
Well, they said some people, if they want to be a little bit more aggressive, will aim to save 25% of their income.
Whoa, 25%. Okay, now that is some next level saving.
That's commitment right there. And they have their own set of benchmarks for that higher savings rate too.
Oh, I bet.
But I think the real takeaway here is it's all about figuring out what works best for you, your situation, your goals, your risk tolerance. You've got to find a strategy that you can actually stick with because that's the most important part.
That makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like finding the right workout routine for you. Like, yeah, you want it to be challenging, you want to see results, but you also want to make sure that it's something you can actually do and like stick with long term.
100%.
Otherwise, what's the point, right? But I do have another question. What about those of us who are listening right now and we're realizing, oh my gosh, I am so far behind on those savings numbers that you're talking about. Is it too late for us?
I am so glad you asked that because this is a really important point.
Yeah.
It is never too late to start or to give your retirement savings a little bit of a boost.
Okay.
It's not about being perfect. It's just about making some progress.
I like it. Progress over perfection.
Right. And luckily in those articles, there were actually a bunch of different ideas for how to catch up if you're feeling a little bit behind.
Yeah.
And some of them are pretty simple, honestly.
Good. Okay, give it to me. What can we do?
Well, for one, if you have access to a 401k through work,
Yep.
maxing out those contributions is a fantastic way to really supercharge those savings. And if your employer offers any kind of matching program, where they'll put in a certain percentage based on how much you're putting in, take it. It's basically free money.
Oh, yeah, free money. Who doesn't love free money?
Exactly.
Sign me up.
Right.
Love it.
And if you don't have a 401k through your employer, you can always open up an IRA.
Right, an individual retirement account.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those allow you to make tax advantage contributions to your retirement savings as well. Oh, and here's a little bonus tip. If you're 50 or older, you can actually make what are called catch-up contributions to both 401ks and IRAs.
Oh, what is this now? Catch-up contributions.
I know, it's awesome. It basically means that you can contribute even more than the standard limits for those accounts. So it can be a great way to boost your savings, especially as you're getting a little bit closer to retirement.
It's like a turbo button for your retirement. Love it.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I remember reading that I wanted to ask you about. Downsizing or relocating as you get closer to retirement. Did you see that?
Yes. Such a good point.
It seems kind of drastic, but also...
Kind of brilliant.
Yes.
It's a great way to free up some cash flow.
Exactly. Imagine selling a big house that you don't really need anymore, maybe moving somewhere with a lower cost of living. I mean, think about how much money that could free up that you could then use for your retirement.
Exactly.
Obviously, it's a big decision.
Right. You can't just pick up and move on a whim.
Right. There are going to be lots of factors to think about, but
It's worth exploring.
it's definitely worth exploring. It could be a game changer for some people.
I think the real lesson here is that it's okay to be creative.
Yeah.
Your retirement plan doesn't have to look exactly like everyone else's, right?
No, absolutely not.
And I think a lot of times we get so caught up in feeling like we're doing it wrong or we're behind. But you've just got to find what works for you in your life.
It's so reassuring to hear that. It's funny, just talking about all of this, it's actually making me feel a little bit better about this whole retirement thing.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I think a lot of times we get so caught up in I should be doing more, I'm behind, but we don't even know where to start.
Yeah. And you know what? It's true. That whole knowledge is power thing, it really applies to financial planning. I think one of the studies that you shared, the 2022 financial literacy study, they actually found that retirement planning is one of the least understood financial concepts out there, even less than digital currencies, which is crazy.
Wait, less than digital currencies? Wow.
I know.
I guess it makes sense, though. Crypto is definitely complicated, but at least it's new and everyone's talking about it. Retirement planning has this reputation for being kind of boring.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. It's not exactly the sexiest topic at a cocktail party.
Not at all.
But, it involves thinking so far into the future and trying to wrap your head around all these different financial products and then trying to guess what's going to happen with investment returns. And I get it. It can feel overwhelming. But the more we actually break it down and just talk about it,
Yeah.
the less scary it becomes.
Absolutely. So as we're starting to wrap up our little deep dive here on retirement savings, what are some of the key takeaways? What do you hope our listeners are walking away thinking about?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just remembering that there is no magic number. There's no one right way to save for retirement, right? It's really a journey. It's personal. But understanding those key things that we've been talking about, what kind of lifestyle do you want to have in retirement? What are your potential sources of income going to be?
Right.
How much could you expect from Social Security? Are you going to work part-time? Those kinds of things. And starting early, even if it's with small amounts, that's okay.
Small amounts add up.
Yes, exactly. They really do. Consistency is key.
Consistency. There's that word again.
I know. It's important. And, it's always okay to ask for help. There are people out there like financial advisors who can help you create a plan. It's like having a personal trainer, but for your money.
Yes. I love that analogy. A personal trainer, but for your finances.
Exactly. They can help you stay on track, keep you accountable, and make adjustments along the way.
Exactly. Okay. So to sum up, knowledge is power, consistency is key, and it's okay to ask for help.
You got it.
And we can't forget about those online calculators that we talked about. Those are super helpful.
Oh my gosh, yes. Those are so helpful.
I love playing around with those things.
It's like having a crystal ball for your finances, kind of.
Yes, exactly. And there are a ton of them out there. A lot of them are free.
Right.
We'll be sure to link to a couple of our favorites, like the one from T. Rowe Price and the one from Maxify
Yes.
in the show notes. You know, all of this talk about the 4% rule and like this idea of planning for a 30-year retirement got me thinking.
About?
What happens if it's longer than 30 years?
Oh, good question.
People are living longer, healthier lives, which is amazing.
It is.
But that also means retirement is going to be longer. So, should we actually be adjusting that 4% rule? Do we need to be saving even more to account for that? Such a good point. It's a great problem to have, right? Living longer than you expect.
Yeah.
But it does change things a bit. Like, what if you have a 40-year retirement? Or a 50-year retirement?
Right.
How much do you need to adjust those savings goals to make sure that you're covered?
It's like a whole other layer of planning.
It is.
A whole other layer to this retirement onion that we're peeling back.
Right. And how do you factor in things like healthcare costs, which are so hard to predict that far in advance? It's tough.
It's a lot to think about, but I think that's the perfect place to leave it for today. We've covered so much ground, from the 10x rule to the 4% rule to starting early to finding what works for you.
And everything in between.
The most important thing is to just take that first step. Get informed. Start planning.
You got this.
Yes, you got this. And create that retirement that you've always dreamed of.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. It's been fun. And remember, it's never too early or too late to start planning for a brighter financial future.